The twilight years of the 19th century and the dawn of the 20th saw a continuation of dominant trends. Zaratherma remained chipping away at the Panama Canal with some modicum of success. The Asian colonies in Europe expanded and indeed became more culturally totalizing. Poyang's Biscay colony, which purchased yet more land from Tribalia, extended so-called civilian ships to their colonial subjects. This was in lieu of a citizenship, allowing them equality in matters of finance and business, but none in matters of law and marriage. In Shaojin's holdings, they expanded the scope of their honor schools, forcing in yet more gluts of children and adding anti-European education to the agenda, seeking to dissolve the ethnic ties of their subjects to each other through shame. Meanwhile, this imposed industrialization and education had begun to bear some unexpected fruits. Namely, great minds began to emerge from some of the more genuinely educational of these facilities, many of whom had a penchant for the political. On August 3rd, 1899, a tutor-turned-self-styled philosopher began to publish his ideas in Shaojin's lowland holdings. Of course, this was achieved via the use of an illicit printing press. His name was Rufus Clofa, and his column, known simply as Concilium, meaning reason, enlightened the public regarding his philosophies. While not dangerous in their own right, they were not approved by the colonial apparatus nonetheless. Clofa and his philosophy revolved around the concept of what he dubbed the societal organism. Given that all things have causes and effects, it is fair to say that everything, and by extension everybody, is connected. This is such that many people, when gathered together, are not simply some atomized mass of individuals, but are themselves vitally connected. So, when a mass of people live in close proximity to each other, they give rise to some metaphysical entity, known as society, which itself follows the laws of reason, as Clofa believed man to be an inherently rational being. This entity is only as healthy as the actions of the individuals comprising it allow it to be. If enough individuals take actions which supposedly don't affect anybody else, they still affect society, and therefore affect everybody living within that society. Be these actions positive or negative, the concept of the individual simply as his own man is inherently lacking because of his immutable connectedness. Therefore, the end goal of political action should be the well-being of the societal organism via actions and behaviors which are unilaterally pursued by the people within it. His press would be shut down by the colonial authorities in 1901, but not before Concilium began to be disseminated across the continent's burgeoning academic circles. In 1903, an Avarignian living in Poyang's Biscay colony named Rasuke Unata published a political treatise titled On Society and Its Will. Here, Unata builds upon Clofa, stating that the societal organism he lays out isn't simply idle. Rather, that it has its own will which drives a people through history. Indeed, Unata's conception of the society is that it isn't simply influenced by individual actions, but rather it is wholly comprised of them. As such, being comprised of these actions and energies, it has a will of its own. If the people are warlike, then their collective wills will feed into their societal organism and drive them through history in a warlike manner. Same for exploratory urges, economic drives, or even artfulness. In his book, he also warns in the negative against what exactly happens when a societal organism is fed by lethargy, decadence, or a tendency towards nihilism. He states definitively that a societal organism fed on these deleterious urges will cause the organism to die and result in anarchy. Furthermore, as an addendum to his work, he lambasts not only the colonial imperialism of the Chinese as a kind of parasitism, but also the concept of multi-ethnic empires like Rome and Phrygia. His conception of the ideal relationship between state and society is one in which there is no real distinction. To Unata, the nation-state is the only real viable political unit. Multi-ethnic empires are dangerous and contrary to nature, as the state exalts itself not only over its own societal organism, but also lords over several other ones. Unata calls for the eviction of the Chinese imperialists and the dismantling of the Three Sisters into their component states. His work sold wildly among Europe's new intellectuals, and found itself beyond its borders even before Unata was imprisoned for his words some months after the book's release. He continued to write in prison, sending coded letters to his former students before they disallowed him this right in 1905. Two of these students would soon flee the Biscay colony, one heading to Avarignia and the other to Serdia. In these places, their skills were in high demand as professors and educated bureaucrats, but they didn't allow this to get in the way of their true ambitions. First, in Avarignia, an Avarignian named Ranatsu Patsiathe found work as a professor, during which time he penned his magnum opus, Cheturneth, roughly translating to Heart of the Beast, which he published in 1911. Patsiathe opens with a redefinition of Clopha's foundational idea, the societal organism. He rejects that the societal organism is essentially rational, instead arguing that, like the people who live within it, the societal organism can be irrational, instinctual, and unpredictable. The societal organism cannot be scientifically tamed and cannot be reasoned with or trained for some specific outcome. It cannot be cheated out of its nature, to be something which does not reflect the people within it. In addition, Clopha's conception of the societal organism doesn't have boundaries, which is rejected by Patsiathe. Patsiathe argues that, in order for a healthy societal organism to function in any meaningful or beneficial capacity, it must be made up of people who have something in common. Drawing on the ideas of Unada and taking them to their radical conclusion, Patsiathe states that the only healthy societal organism is one made up of people who share essential, immutable characteristics which mark them as being members of a group. With the scientific advancements of the last few centuries, it has gotten ever easier to identify the races of man, and therefore to identify the natural societal organisms which should govern the world. His solution to the woes of his people and the world itself is this essential metaphysical ethno-nationalism, which should be achieved by gathering the people according to their race, all while promoting healthy, pro-social public morality, like physical fitness, large families, and objectively beautiful art. Patsiathe dubbed this new conception of the societal organism as the societal beast. The societal beast is, put simply, the metaphysical totem of a mass of people who are united in their blood and a historical claim to their soil. He became an overnight sensation across Avarignia, and various groups and institutions fought for his attention and favor as a result. However, as the years wore on, it became abundantly clear that he held no love for the monarchy. Indeed, he believed it had done a rather poor job of maintaining the nation, and should be undone in favor of a military government born out of the race's most genetically fit individuals. As such, his popularity with the government collapsed, but his popularity with the people persisted, and he was driven into hiding in 1914. Meanwhile, the man who went to Serdia was himself a Tribalian doctor, known by the name of Vel Venois. In Serdia, he promoted his ideology in his free time. Serdia, being a country voluntarily under the religious auspices of the Zofstanal Church, was a unique theater for his ideas, which he published in 1915 under the title The Practice of Perfection. His conception of the societal organism was limitless. Where Clopha left the boundaries vague, Venois simply said they did not exist. All of humanity was one great societal organism, and was furthermore essentially rational, and could respond to specific stimuli. He argued that, so long as the people comprising the global society were as rational, united, and equal as possible, then the societal organism of all humanity would be perfectly healthy. To these ends, he targeted factors he viewed as derangements, these being superstition, organized religion, capitalism, and nationalism. He described them as parasites and said they must be destroyed by any means necessary in order to achieve the global utopia of tomorrow, one which is classless, stateless, and founded upon reason, a state of being he referred to simply as perfection. His ideas made him reviled in Serdia, where he was nearly killed in the streets. Having lost his station and nearly all his money, he wandered across the mountainous border with Phrygia, where he brought a copy of his book and disseminated his ideas amongst the lowest wretches of society. There, he became the political prophet of thieves, murderers, and the deranged. It would take some time before his ideology would be able to coherently bubble up from the swamp to his intended audience, the industrial workers of Phrygia. In 1916, being left with the ideas of Clopha and his ideological descendants, a prominent Serdian author, known primarily for his romance novels, entered the ideological fray. Andrei Horvat published his own work, called Sociotonomy. Sociotonomy opens by revisiting the societal organism yet again, where Horvath argues that people are imperfect and oftentimes evil or malicious. As such, the people must be acted upon by a perfecting force, the only source of which is God, specifically the single unchanging creator of the universe found in the Christian faith. In other words, the societal organism cannot be healthy unless acted upon by God, which cannot happen unless the people themselves are acted upon by God. Therefore, he proposes the optimal idea of the nation is one in which there is no distinction between the church and the societal organism. The best actions to these ends would be the exaltation of the church over the state, the mandatory conversion of unbelievers, and the expansion of the nation in order to subsume new populations to convert. Religion, to Horvath, is the key to making the societal organism work for the benefit of those imperfect souls within it. And so, barely 20 years on, a newly industrialized Europe is suddenly brimming with political philosophies and movements, the most significant of which are Pazziism, philosophy, and socioautonomy, all rooted in the idea of the societal organism. By 1916, these movements were still in their infancy, but it is clear to whoever read the works which define this age, they wouldn't remain idle for long.